Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a brewer that it's been quite a while since we've jumped into one of their beers, and that is Hardywood Park Craft Brewery out of Richmond, Virginia. Today we're jumping into their Bourbon Barrel Cru. This is a bourbon barrel aged Abbey-style quad ale that clocks in at 12% ABV. Now, I don't remember the exact beer that I had from them last. I think I've only had one or two, but I do recall that it was a barrel-aged beer and it was very, very good. So today's I expect to also be very good. Label art on this, there's not really much to talk about. It's just got a clean label that tells you about it, blah, blah, blah. Gives you the data on the beer, but it's got this really interesting short stubby can that or stubby bottle that kind of puts me in mind a little bit of, can't think of the name of it, maybe Red Stripe? I feel like that white and red labeled Jamaican beer, I believe is called Red Stripe, has kind of a stubby bottle like this as well. It's an atypical bottle shape, and I believe this is just 12 ounces. It is. It's exactly 12 ounces. So we won't quite get this in my nice all-purpose Sam Adams glass, but we will get it poured gently right away anyway. All right, yeah, that's looking like a classic quad. Beautiful caramelly brown color. Looks absolutely fantastic. Oh, we'll get the whole beer in there. And a Belgian style, Abbey style quad is going to be one that's super active in terms of carbonation. So yeah, the head, it is what it is, guys. I'm going to get right up over this to get what detail I can. Okay, I do smell quite clearly the bourbon on this. It really sticks out. It smells quite caramelly, and I'm also getting some underlying fruit notes. There's kind of like date and apricot aromas coming off of this beer. Now, what you cannot see, and I'm sure that the camera is not picking up, is that there is a massive rush of effervescence that's just going straight up the middle. That is why this head collapsed as soon as it was trying to form. It's very, very, very active in terms of carbonation, and you get that often with these big high ABV beers. A Belgian style, Abbey style quad for sure is one. But it smells fantastic. Visually, yeah, it looks the part. It's that classic caramelly brown. Smells amazing, so let's just jump right in, see what this one's about. Oh, ho, ho, ho. Oh, man. Oh, man. Hardywood Park. My guys. Bravo. Bravo. That's exceptionally well done. Okay, so they call it an Abbey-style quad. Guys, I am fortunate to have gotten into really good and craft beer while living in Tampa, Florida. I'll be out of here very soon. But what I call my home away from home is just around the corner, 5 minutes from me, this famed German restaurant in Tampa called Mr. Dunderbox. And they have, 50 to 70 beers on tap in there, about 500 in their cold cooler, and then they have a cellar that has about another 1,500 beers. So I am intimately ingrained with the classic German and Belgian beer styles. And let me tell you, this Abbey-style quad is spot on for what any Belgian quad I have ever had tastes like. Obviously, this is bourbon barrel aged. They don't do that in the Abbeys. They're not barrel aging. They're brewing the classic styles. I mean, they don't have to abide by it, but they may as well be abiding by the Deutsches Reinheitsgebot. And it's effectively the same thing. They're not barrel aging their beers. But that is what this tastes like to me. It tastes like a quintessential Belgian Abbey-style quad, only it's got the addition of the bourbon barrel. It is spot on the money. Everything about this beer, if I were blindfolded, I would say, that's a quad. It's a Belgian quad, but I taste and I smell bourbon. And yeah, that's exactly what they produced here. This is just extremely well done. I almost am praying and hoping that they have a non-barrel aged version of this that I can try, because this is such a wonderful craft American interpretation of a classic Belgian style. It is remarkably well done, guys. Remarkably well done. I know I'm waxing poetic here, but I really need to hammer this point home, just how spot on everything about the profile of this beer is. Okay, so I had a lot of information to process. What I got was absolutely fantastic. I am going to do myself and you the service of jumping back in before I talk about anything, because it's been a minute and a half I've been rambling on, but it needed to be said. It's important. So we're going to jump back in, second sip, then we'll come back and we will start going through the categories, but unbelievable beer. Oh, that is so good. So, funny enough, the first thing that I get on this beer is not even the barrel. The first thing that I get on this beer is classic Abbey-style quad. It is just a massive punch of just this ribbon of caramelly malty goodness that's packed full of rich fruit in that kind of cobbler sphere. We're talking dates, apricots, figs, plums. It's got a lot in common with the barley wine. Indeed, there's a lot of shared malts. It's in that same kind of ABV category. So there is a lot of commonality. There's just small little things that kind of move them into their own category. This is really rich on its malt-centric side. And aside from these awesome fruit that are popping out, it's very, very caramelly. This is a very caramel-forward malt bill. And this would be very prototypical in an Abbey-style quad. It's also got a slight booziness to it. And yeah, barley wines have very high ABVs, but in general, they don't often taste particularly boozy. This one does. Now, I don't know if that's coming out of just how true to the style they brewed it, or if part of that has to do with the bourbon barrel aging, but it's worth noting that it does have multiple elements that are exactly like what you would expect to get from just a classic Belgian brewed Abbey-style quad. Absolutely on the money. And then, of course, we've got the bourbon barrel aging, so that adds a ton of aroma and flavor elements and compounds. So the first thing I can say, this is a 12% beer. This one teeters on the line of kind of middle of the road medium heavy to higher end of medium heavy. It doesn't feel super oppressive, and that's relatively common with an Abbey-style quad. They don't typically feel ridiculously heavy, even though they are high gravity, high ABV beers. It doesn't feel oppressive. It's still one that you clearly know as soon as you swallow, oh, it's so big and bold and pungent, I'm going to be sipping on this, I'm not slamming it. So yeah, that part is right. In terms of the mouthfeel, this one actually feels like it has maybe just a tick more resistance than your average Belgian style Abbey quad would have. But, you know, it is what it is. It doesn't feel off the mark by much. It's pretty much hitting right in the middle of what I would expect on the body and the mouthfeel. Body maybe a little bit below the mark, and mouthfeel maybe a little bit below the average mark. But you combine them together, and the weight and the texture, it's right. They did a great job with this, and it's very wet and round. So with the flavor profile, the first thing you do get is that big burst of caramel, and then it opens up into the fruit immediately. It's caramel into these kind of cobblered, like baked dessert fruit quality characteristics that pop out, and then right around the 2.5 to 3 second mark, that's when the bourbon, boom, it hits you, and it's very, very caramelized sugar forward on this bourbon, as well as vanilla. That's kind of the two big driving underlying flavors and aromas that I'm getting from the bourbon presence in this beer. And I can't believe it. I just looked down into the top of the glass. This thing is still going bonkers with just an insane rush of carbonation straight up the middle. That head had no chance to retain whatsoever, guys. This is just active beyond belief. It is active beyond belief. It's almost like I have an etching in the bottom of my Sam Adams glass for head creation, and I do not. But yeah, it's going bonkers. But yeah, this beer is absolutely incredible, guys. It's very, very multi-layered, very, very faceted. You get the caramel up front, then just layer and layer, and they pop, whiz, bang. All of these incredible fruit. Then that bourbon opens up. Get this nice spirit barrel sense to it. Just boatloads of additional caramel and toffee and vanilla. And they're all interweaving. Now, the one thing I got to say about the balance on this beer is that I think that they really nailed the essence of an Abbey-style quad. And I'm taking the barrel side of the equation out of this because it's so present and so crystal clear to me. I have had probably far more Belgian style quads than the average person will ever drink in their life. I mean, I can't even tell you, hundreds upon hundreds from all different brewers, and some strict from the Abbeys and some other brewers that are Belgian or German or in that general vicinity that brew Abbey style, just as this is Abbey style. It's not an Abbey ale. It's not brewed by monks. Okay, it is in the style of that beer. But I mean, just a ludicrous amount I've had. This is just absolutely on point. And the balance of the underlying beer itself is spot on. If it didn't have this barrel aging, I guarantee you, if you put this in a lineup of actual Belgian Abbey quads, I would not be able to tell you that an American craft brewer brewed this, and that is the highest compliment I could give it, bar none. But jumping back to the barrel, because that is an element, aside from the incredible aromas, yeah, you just get this massive, massive additional kick of caramelization and toffee, and this really big undercurrent of vanilla. And in this, it's rich. And because there's so much kind of toffee and caramelization in this malt bill, it really is almost like this buttered vanilla. It's almost like home churned vanilla ice cream level of decadence. It's absolutely incredible. And that mixing with these very cobbler forward fruit accents, as well as the underlying caramel and toffee malt-centric characters coming out of this. I mean, this is dessert beer in a glass. It's absolutely delicious, guys. So balance, they nailed it. And then finally, the finish. So this has a lot more in common with a standard Abbey quad than what you would maybe guess that this would, being that it's bourbon barrel aged. Yeah, you do get a little bit longer length on the finish on this because of that bourbon barrel, but it's nowhere near what you would probably expect on first sip. It actually really dials back the intensity pretty quickly. There is just a lingering whisper of that caramel and that bourbon on the back of the palate, but it is extremely faint. So no, I wouldn't say this is a particularly long finish. I'd say it's high end of average, maybe above average for the style, but since it's barrel aged, it's really just high end of average. But all that said, just an incredible, incredible beer. This is a tough beer style to do, and Hardywood Park nailed it. I absolutely love this one. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, count my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Hardywood Park Craft Brewery's Bourbon Barrel Cru. This was an Abbey-style quad ale that clocked in at 12% ABV. This one was bourbon barrel aged. Hardywood Park Craft Brewery is based in Richmond, Virginia. So this beer I really, really enjoyed. There was so much about it that I was just absolutely blown away. The absolute masterful execution of the style from an American-based craft brewer. If this were just a base Abbey quad, I mean, I literally could put them side by side, eliminate that bourbon barrel, and I would be hard-pressed to tell you, oh, that's an American interpretation of the style. They absolutely nailed it through and through. So, that being said, this, as we go through the scores, is going to be one of those great examples where I really hope that you do pay attention to everything I say about all of the categories, because the end score is not the sum of all this beer's parts, but nonetheless, I have to rank what I experienced, so we're going to go through them one by one. Starting with the aroma, this was classic Belgian Abbey quad, and yes, of course, that bourbon barrel was also quite present. Very, very pungent, smelled classic, but with that added barrel, I give it a 10 out of 10. For the taste, I absolutely loved the flavor profile of this beer. Yes, the bourbon barrel was present, and it should be. It's bourbon barrel aged, but the underlying base beer itself was such a great American interpretation of what a Belgian Abbey quad is. They absolutely knocked it out of the park. The taste gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the body, The body, this is one where, okay, it is what it is. It was kind of on the low end of average for a typical quad, Belgian style, Abbey style quad. It is what it is. It had weight. It wasn't super light. It wasn't super heavy, so not really out of the normal scape, but it was on the lower end. I did give the body a 4 out of 10. For the mouthfeel on this one was actually a bit more resistant than you would get from your average Belgian Abbey quad. It was really on the high end of average, and I did give the mouthfeel a 6 out of 10. For the finish on this was absolutely above average for an Abbey-style quad. And really on this one, it came down to predominantly the bourbon barrel aging, but also the underlying rich intensity of the caramel and toffee notes coming out of the malt bill. It was a tandem of those two things that pushed it out much longer than your average Belgian style Abbey. The finish I did give a 7 out of 10. For the head and retention, this is the category that beat this beer up the most. Look, you don't really expect to see a crazy great head formation or retention on an Abbey quad, but even for the style, it was definitely below average. The head and retention only gets a 3 out of 10. For the appearance, this was textbook. It does get a perfect 10 out of 10. For the balance on this beer was absolutely top notch. And really a beer like this, we're talking the malt bill, the yeast strain, plus the barrel. What barrel did they use? How old was the barrel? How long did they leave it in? So all of these things play a part, but what I got out of this beer, I absolutely think that they nailed the balance perfectly. In fact, the first impression I got on first sip was not the barrel, which is surprising. It was the underlying Abbey-style quad, and that, kudos to you, Hardywood Park. The balance gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangibles, subjectively, I absolutely loved this beer. I did give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Finally is an example of the style. So look, there were a few categories this beer lost quite a few points, but in the grand scheme, I think that this is a great example of how to do an Abbey-style quad, an American craft interpretation, and then they went and added the barrel in as an added ingredient. It's a complex beer, and they executed it beautifully. So all the missed points and all across the various categories, I do still think this is a wonderful example. I only docked 1 point here. Example of the style does get a 9 out of 10. So the total score on Hardywood Park Craft Brewery's Bourbon Barrel Cru is a 79 out of 100. So this is where I yet again reiterate, this is a beer where I hope that you paid attention to all of the scores and what I said about it. The score is 79. It's still well above average, but if you, it's 79, I'll skip that one. No. Please don't do that. Absolutely do yourself the favor. Do this beer the service. I have to be objective in rating the beers exactly as I experience them in my controlled environment. It may be different where you are. Certainly humidity, altitude. There's a ton of things that change the beer drinking experience. I'm at a low-lying elevation in Florida before I move up to the mountains, so I'm expecting things to be different when I get moved. But be that as it may, this beer was absolutely incredible, guys. Just a wonderful, wonderful interpretation of an Abbey-style quad, and then they bourbon barrel aged it. It made for an intensely pleasurable beer drinking experience. This is a beer I would recommend all day long to fans of Abbey-style ales, as well as people that love big, high ABV barrel-aged beers. This is one not to be missed. Folks, that is today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just toggle on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.